Group 93, good morning, and this is Caring for the Community. I am so excited. Before I even move forward, I just got to say, I'm already excited because I have watched these amazing leaders in the community, and they have gone over and beyond to extend their hand to so many people in this community. And I want to say, I don't know, should I call you pioneers? Senior leaders. I don't know what to call you, but all I say is thank you for being part of the Unapologetically Black series. And what I want you guys to do to kick everything off, I'm going to call you by name. Based on the things that we're going through in our country and in our community right now, I just need one word to describe exactly how you feel. You're the third conversation with amazing leaders, and I'm looking forward to hearing what your word is. So you have one word. I'm going to start with Tanae Jordan, Pastor Tanae Jordan.
Donna, I'm excited.
Excited. All right, Dr. Swafford. You're on mute.
I'm hopeful.
All right. Mr. Harris, Ronald Harris.
I'm encouraged.
All right. Dr. Evelina Holmes.
Finally.
What's your word?
Finally.
Finally. All right. Mr. Charles Lowerly. Am I saying it right? Yeah.
No, it's Lori.
Lori. Oh, correct me. I'm sorry.
Overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed. All right. Dr. Varner.
Enough. That's my word. Enough.
Mr. Logan. You're on mute.
Energized.
Energized. Coach.
Change.
Change. And I got everybody there, right? So I just want to say I have two people that educated me on this line. So that is Coach Jennings. And both of them had an instrumental part of my life. I think about it because I've lost 100 pounds. So you made me run a mile, Coach. And the reason why I got in the media, and I've told this story and I can get teary-eyed, it's a lady that reminded me of Oprah Winfrey. So I went to her class and she stretched me. I'm trying not to cry. And she pushed me and made me deserve my first C. And because she saw the best in me. So she made me read a poem and she probably doesn't remember it. And then I did not understand what she was making me read during Black History Month. So it's pertinent to today. It says, you may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Because I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders? Sorry, I got tears in my eyes, y'all. I got to make sure I get these out. Get this right. Shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard? Because I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air, I rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling. I bear in the tide, leaving behind nights of terror and fear. I rise into a daybreak that's wondrously clear. I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. And I want to dedicate that to all of you all this morning. I gave everybody else a shirt and a saying, but Dr. Varner, you made me read that and talk about the metaphor and the simile years ago. And I want to just start out the conversation with you. And you guys can feel free to answer the question as well. There's a movement going on because we have seen history repeat itself. And what is the difference between the movement now, the movement in the 60s, and the movement now?
Okay, I have to preface my comments with this. I saw you do an interview for Girls Inc. And you never know whether kids get the point, but in your comments, you got the point. You said there's so many outstanding role models. And you mentioned maybe wanting to be Oprah, but then you decided to be Donna. And in that moment, I knew you got it because the world needed Harriet Tubman and Barbara Jordan and an Oprah, but the world also needs Donna. So you got it, kid.
Thank you.
Now, about the movement, I am so excited about the movement, and I'll tell you why. Catherine Booth, who was one of the co-founders of the Salvation Army, said, if we want a better future, we have to disrupt the present. And that's what I see in the movement. I saw it during civil rights, and I'm seeing it in the movement now. People willing to stand up and disrupt the present so that we can have a better future. I have been awed by the fact that it's gone on so long. Even in Chattanooga, I thought, okay, they'll protest a couple of days, get it out of their systems, but we can't get it out of our systems. I grew up in segregated Chattanooga where we learned, you know, be compliant, just take it, be a good Negro. And, you know, that worked for a while, but it doesn't work anymore. And it doesn't work anymore because old wounds just keep opening. Every time there's some brutality, those old wounds keep opening. And the protests are that festering that's been going on beneath the surface. Those protests are the cries of thousands of slaves and descendants of slaves who are screaming out from our very DNA. Mm-hmm. And they're saying what my word is, enough. Mm-hmm. We have had enough.
Enough. I'm going to ask Pastor Jordan. I was actually streaming live on a Sunday, and you said, quote unquote, just a little bit, I may not have it spot on, but you said you weren't surprised by what's happened to Mr. Floyd, Ahmaud, Breonna.
Because the list goes on, Donna. I'm with Dr. Varner. We've had enough. I think perhaps the sermon you listened to was "I Can't Breathe." Mm-hmm. I'm like George Floyd and so many others that have come along. I've had enough, and I can't breathe. When you asked me my word, I said excited, because I am excited that there are young people who are standing up and who are voicing their protests. We have a right to do that. We're in a country that was created through protests, the Boston Tea Party. But I am concerned
Mhm.
I am concerned about our protest, understanding that you are not the beginning of protest, but you are a continuation of protest.
Right.
Nothing happens out of a vacuum.
Mhm.
And my concern is that we understand that all generations and everyone play a role. I'm not in the street. I'm not in the street protesting, not now. I've been there. I've been there when I was much younger.
Are you're watching it on social media? So have
I
you
am watching it, yeah. And not only am I watching it on social media, I probably would be there if I wasn't the age of COVID with all of the underlying conditions. But I am fighting just as hard. I am fighting just as hard the issues that are out there. And I just wish that we would understand that we're on the same team. Everybody is not the quarterback at the same time. There are split ends, there are guards, there are tackles. Coach knows this. It takes a team to win. You can't just be a great quarterback. And so because we're not in the same position, the same place, I wish we would understand that we're on the same team. We're fighting for the same causes. We just have different positions.
Right. I do want to ask, did anybody protest in the 60s? I know, Pastor Jordan, you mentioned you were there then, but what was that experience like here in Chattanooga?
Donna?
Yes, Dr. Hall.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm a native of Tuskegee Institute, Alabama. Yes, I did protest in the 60s.
Mhm.
And I find the protests today very different in that we see actually more whites than we do blacks. It's very diverse. It's gone longer than I expected it to, like Dr. Bonner said. And I think that we do need, I wonder why there aren't more African Americans involved this time.
Mm-hmm.
I know one reason that I can guess is because of the COVID-19.
Right.
We are being impacted by that more than anyone else other than the Latinx community. And that may be a reason. But I am impressed with the diversity, not just whites. We have a mixture. We have Asians. And not only that, but it's around the world. That's what's very inspiring to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because living in Barbados, West Indies, I know there's a lot of prejudice in London and England.
Right.
And to see them tear down that statue, throw it in the river, that's what we need to do here in Chattanooga.
You know, yesterday was
look at the problems here at home. Right. We need to start here before we start looking elsewhere. And thank you, Edna. You answered a question I have been longing to hear. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you did answer a question for me. And I just want to thank you. And when I talk to you privately, I'll tell you what it was.
Oh, man, let us in. No, I'm just kidding.
Looking forward to it. I'll share it.
Yesterday was Juneteenth. And if you looked at the Tennessee Aquarium, if you looked on your timeline on social media, if you were in the workplaces, if you saw downtown at EPB, you saw Black Lives Matter, you saw Juneteenth shirts, you saw different celebrations in the workplace. And I'm going to talk to Dr. Ron Harris. And I want to ask you, you know, I just kind of want to transition into corporate America. And I asked the other groups that I interviewed, what questions do you want to ask our leaders? And my question is for you, what are we doing or what should we be doing in the workplace, corporate America, nonprofits, to ensure that we are mentoring the next generation of leaders in their 20s and in their 30s and 40s?
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to share with this august body, all of whom I respect incredibly. From a corporate standpoint, let me just kind of back up and piggyback on something that's been said already. I use the word encouraged because I look at these young people, and I've been teaching generational diversity for a number of years now. And one of the things that we forget, if you're over 40 and you deal with a young person, 25 years of age or younger, that young person has more in common with someone of another race and ethnicity than they do you. Mm-hmm. And so the makeup of the young people in the street today does not surprise me whatsoever. And the thing that I'm most encouraged about is that these young people aren't trying to make a point, they're trying to make progress. And I think this is really important. And as it relates to corporate America, right now, corporate America is back on its heels and it's started to react to everything that's going on. It's in a giving mode, if you will. It's in a involvement mode. But this is a window of time, and corporate America is doing a lot of activity. But I'm convinced that activity without accomplishment is just activity. And so we've got to take advantage of this window because it will end. I'm not being pessimistic. It will end. Right. Once the stimulus is gone, so are the responses. And so we have to take full advantage of what's going on here to let our young people know. But everybody on that's here today knows the value of sending the elevator back down. We've got to do that. We've got to continue to encourage our young people who are in corporate America that your job description should be bigger than your job, or your job should be bigger than your job title. Okay, let me do that again. Your job should be larger than your job title, because we have a responsibility to let these young people know in corporate America that somebody's negative perception of you does not have to become your reality, and that you can rise to the top. Thank you for doing the poem, Rise. Mm-hmm. But the point becomes, what do we do now? We've got to understand how corporate America works. And unfortunately, we don't always understand that. We don't understand the impact of corporate America on nonprofits, not-for-profits, and small businesses. Corporate America has a role to play in our community, but we've got to understand how to get into it. And I'll say this parenthetically, Dr. Swafford is a master. She could teach a doctorate course. I heard her just casually talking about applying for grant. She knows how to get $5 million on her campus.
Yes, she does.
From a Blue Cross.
Yes, she does.
Y'all need to have her on just one day by herself with a tutorial.
And it's not just writing ability, it's results.
Yeah, and that's my point. She doesn't engage in activity just for the sake of activity. She has accomplishments attached to it. And that's what we have to do. Warren is so tired of hearing me say this, but we have to teach our young people in corporate America how to go to lunch. Our young people need to know how to ride the elevator.
Yes.
Our young people need to know how to walk down the hall. And our young people need to always answer the question, who do people see coming when they see you coming? And that's important to success. But most of corporate America is looking for a place to spend some dollars, but we aren't always ready to receive them because we don't understand the process. And I think that's vitally important.
I'm gonna jump over to Mr. Lurie real quick. And I want to ask you the question, you know, you've been in law enforcement for years now and are retired from law enforcement. What conversations while you were on the force were you having when it comes to some of the racial unjust that some of our communities experiencing, that some of our officers are dealing with? I just want your, point of view just on the entire situation, especially coming from law enforcement.
Well, Donna, I'll go back to my beginning because I am not a native Chattanoogan. I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky, and I was hired under Jerry Pitts when he was sheriff at that particular time. I am the first Black that was hired by the sheriff's office that had a college degree. Mm-hmm. the things that I endure, if I had been smart enough to write down everything every day, I could write a book and you would think that it was fictional from some of the things that I went through. But when I started, the very first place that they placed me to patrol by myself on an evening shift from 3 to 11 was Mowbray Mountain.
Wow.
So not being from Tennessee, not knowing, just hearing about quote unquote hillbilly Tennesseans, et cetera, my parents did not instill in me to dislike a person because of the color of their skin. Mm-hmm. So when I came in with the mindset that, okay, I have a college degree, fine, but I have no street experience. And I figured that these guys would embrace me and teach me the street. Instead, what I ran into was, okay, here's this black, he's not from Tennessee, he's got a college degree, he's gonna get promoted before me, so we need to do everything we can do to get him fired. And that was probably the first 5 years or so of my experience with the sheriff's office. I worked the Soddy Daisy area, Sell Creek, and Mowbray Mountain. So what I have seen in the process and in the progress, and this is where my word overwhelmed came from, because it is overturning, it is changing things. And whereas I was an individual that was not liked, that was resented, 41 years later, when I retired as the deputy chief, and I was the second African-American deputy chief for the sheriff's office, which is over 200 years old. Richard Thurman was the first, and I was the second. But as I retired and was coming close to it, a lot of the Caucasian officers, which makes up majority of the sheriff's office, did not want me to leave. They saw me as an individual that supported them, that was very straightforward with them. If they were wrong, I told them, you're wrong. If they were right, and if the administration was trying to mess with them, then I spoke up on their behalf. I stayed in constant contact and conflict with Sheriff Hammond, Sheriff Cupp, I mean, you name it. But I knew what it was like to be thrown under the bus.
Can I ask you a question? How did you learn to have that confidence? Because being a leader myself, or trying to be at your level, how do you develop that confidence when to call people out? Because sometimes people are fearful of their jobs, their positions. How did you develop that confidence?
I think my parents instilled that in me, especially my mother. For me, it is one of the things that my daddy told me. I was the first in my family to graduate college. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that my daddy always told me, he said, you're going to have a lot of obstacles thrown at you, but one thing that nobody can ever take away from you is your education. Mm. And that stuck with me. And I realized, so even though I may address conflicts, and I did put myself in a position a few times where they definitely wanted to fire me, but I had placed myself through education, through specialized classes, that they could not just throw me off to the side without catching hell for getting rid of me. So it's all about education, but it's also about being a man and standing up for yourself. I refuse. I saw too many times where, like I said, I was thrown under the bus. And I just refused to sit back and watch other officers be thrown under a bus. But if they're wrong, I have no problem in sitting up and saying, hey, and that was always up to the sheriff. If I disagree with the sheriff, I told him up front, no. And at one time he got to the point where he said, We need to agree to disagree because you're not going to change your mind. I said, that's correct. I'm not.
Donna, can I add something to that?
Could you give me, go right ahead, and then I need to talk to Dr. Swafford and Coach and.
It'll be brief. It will be very.
Right.
The one thing that I tell young people, I am so glad Mr. Lara said what he said, because what I tell young people is that you must get to know yourself, who you are. Write down the positives, write down the negatives, get your best friends or your family members or someone to also do the same thing so that you will get to know who you are. Once you know who you are, your strengths, your weaknesses, etc., you can build on your strength, you can work on your weaknesses. But I think once you know who you are, no one like education can take that away from you.
That's right. That's right. Thank you, Dr. Holmes. I'm going to toss this to Dr. Swafford. And Dr. Swafford and I have a lot of conversations. I think I have a lot of mentors on this call, but I want to ask you this, and you've been a mentor to me, not officially, but I'll ask you a question and you'll just jump in and I get everything that I wanted. How can Black leaders best engage you? How can they come to you and what's the best way for them to engage you to get advice? And if you could say anything to leaders between the ages of 30 and 50 years old, what would you say to them?
Well, the best way to get in touch with me is to call me. You know, I answer my phone. So that's the best way to get in touch with me. And I was talking to one of my mentees who was about 43 day before yesterday. And, you know, the question came up, help me figure out how to get to the table and be heard. And going back to what Dr. Holmes said, you know, I too was raised I was in Bakewell, Tennessee with two African-American parents, but my dad, you know, raised us to understand that forget the color, look at the character. And so we didn't dismiss anyone because of the color of their skin. But he also knew raising 7 children, African-American children, that, as Dr. Holmes said, know who you are, know what you stand for. And he said this to us, he said, you can't treat everybody the same, but you can treat everybody right.
Right.
And so, you know, so one of the things that I say to people is I said to not only the 40 to 50-year-olds, you know, it took me a long time to be invited to the table. And I say this all the time, take your place at the table, right? Have some plans, because plans without action falls on deaf ears. And so we got to be about the means of having a plan and getting something done. And so I always go back to Ron Edmonds, who is an educator that I just love his quotes. And basically Ron Edmonds said about education, we know what to do. We have the tools to teach children. What we have to finally come to is the fact is, how do we feel about not having done it so far? And I take that same phrase into this racism issue. We know what to do. It's how do we feel about not having done it and solved the problem and held people's feet to the fire so far. It's not, you know, we've been talking about, if you go back to MLK in 1967 in one of his speeches, he said, you know, where do we go from here? He said, we have to figure out where we are and figure out why we haven't done something about where we are. And yes. I think that we have to, as Black leaders, bring other people to the table. But I can remember going to meetings for my superior when I was, and this is something we have to do for others. I was probably, I don't know, it was in the 90s. So I'm being sent to meetings for my superior, the president of the college. I was at every table. At that time, nobody knew me. But one thing that man did for me was he put me at the table and people got to know me. And as Black leaders, I got to bring people with me and bring them to the table. You know, that's one of the things that I think that we have to do, and we have to teach people how to be interrupters and not go along with the program.
Right.
I can honestly say, you know, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Dr. Swafford. I would sit back and watch keynote speaker Ron Harris, Coach Jennings leading organizations, you know, Dr. Varner. And when I got to the table, I thought it would be as friendly and as open and as inviting. And when I got there, I mean, I even remember me and Pastor Jordan used to talk when he first brought Stop the Madness to Chattanooga. He was like, how do I manipulate? And we were connecting then. And before I knew it, he had taken off and connected with people he needed to connect with. But it's lonely at that table sometimes. I remember, and I always quote Dion Jenkins, TVFCU, Diversity and Inclusion. And I said, Dion, why don't you invite me to the table? She said, Donna, I am the +1. And sometimes when you get to those tables, I don't know what to do when I get there. But not only do you invite your people to the table, you got to prepare them with a strategy once they sit at that table.
Yes.
It's lonely. I'm being honest, it's a lonely. I've been a radio girl, but when I crossed over to nonprofits and corporate, it was a different look.
Yes.
Let me say this, Donna. That was in the 90s, right? When I was placed in these places, just because the president at that time, he was tired of going to meetings, so he trusted me, so I went. But let me say the sad part of it, the other side of this. That was in the 90s.
Right.
Right? I'm going to be president of Downtown Rotary here next week. But
yes.
I wasn't invited to that table until 2015. Now you roll from the 90s to 2015.
Wow.
Right? And so that, you know, as they say, what's that song? The world won't get no better if we just let it be. We can't just let it be anymore.
Right.
And I am hopeful. I am really hopeful that, you know, MLK was a great leader. But the downside of that was it was one person. I'm hoping that we have more than one we have to have more than one MLK. There's got to be more.
Right, right. I'm going to toss this to, I got to talk to Coach. I got to talk to Mr. Logan. Both of you guys I've watched you for years, been mentors. My mama's best friend is Mr. Logan's sister, in case y'all didn't know that. You're on mute, Mr. Logan, for some reason, or I can't hear you. But I'm going to go to Coach, and Mr. Logan, can you say something so I can make sure I hear you? I can't hear you. I'm going to go to Coach Jennings real quick, but you're not on mute for some reason, Mr. Logan, but I can't hear you. Coach Jennings, so what has been your vision for Chattanooga? Since you've started, did you have a vision, and how has that vision changed over the years?
Well, Donna, yes, there always has to be a vision. Solomon, the wise one, said, without a vision, the people perish. So everything that I've ever involved myself with, I've developed a vision. And number one, that vision was to develop people with character.
Mm-hmm.
From a biblical perspective, I want people to know the Lord. In other aspects, when you are hindered from sharing the Lord and the Bible outright, you talk about character, because that's where character comes from, the Word of God and Scripture. So the whole idea for my vision is, one, you can't legislate the heart of man, but your teaching and practices and living out the Word of God, people see what you stand for, and they will begin to see what you would tolerate also. The other thing I think about is, growing up, you got to know who the bullies are.
Right.
You got to know who the people, and at every level there's bullies. Growing up in the streets of Chattanooga, South Chattanooga, I had to deal with bullies. When I went to college, I had to deal with bullies. In education, in the church even, in corporate America. You got to know, when I talk about bullies, people who's trying to dominate, control, and intimidate you. And you got to develop a strategy within your vision as to how to overcome those bullies or those who are trying to dominate, control, and influence you and demean you not to be who God created you to be. And breaking through those ranks, as you mentioned earlier, having a strong sense of who you are, as has been mentioned, you can deal with those bullies. You can face them and let them know how you feel, what you think, and talk about what needs to change, what needs to improve. And when you see injustices happening, you're willing to stand up for them and speak to truth to power without worried about holding on to a job, but worried about advancing the cause of Jesus and the gospel, and for humanity to be in a better position than we arrive. So that's the way I think and feel like strategy is important for us as we go forward, taking the next steps and making sure we make the type of progress that's really impactful.
Thank you. I just remember, watching you all as I grew up and just, I've seen your careers all flourish into things that I didn't think, you would do. I mean, Coach Jennings, I remember, I know, I just want to pay homage. I remember being in CSAS gym. I remember you were a coach at Dalewood at one point in time with my cousins. And to see you leading youth and family development now, Bethlehem Center, and everybody making sure that you're at the table. How did you develop those relationships through the years? Like, what did you do to continue going and making sure that your voice was heard?
Well, the mentors that I had coming through the ranks really helped me. Franklin McCauley was one of those individuals early on at Howard School, and helping me understand the system. And he talked to us about how this system that was white male dominated, and how he was helping us to prepare to deal with that. As I came through the ranks, I had a mentor by the name of James Spratlin too. Edna, you remember Mr. Spratlin? I was coaching in the gym and teaching physical education. He began to use me. He said something to me one day that blew my mind. He said, "Coach, I'm the principal of the school, but you're one of the leaders of the school."
Oh, wow.
I said, "Mr. Spratlin, I'm just a physical education teacher and a coach. What do you mean by that?" And he said, "Well, the teachers and students look up to you and they respect you based on how you treat them and lead them." And he moved me as a teacher on special assignment and started training me to be assistant principal and then ultimately principal, because he got sick. And when he was out of school, I always get a substitute for my class, and he would move me up into the office. So people like that, your mentors, and as Elaine mentioned also, we got to train the next generation up. We got to coach them up, train them up, bring them along, because our time is winding down, and we need to make sure that the next generation is strong, healthy, and prepared for the war to fight good against evil, truth, and righteousness, and stand on that wall, that voice that really makes an impact.
Thank you, Coach. Mr. Logan, can we hear you? For some reason, it's still on mute. I'm sorry. We can't hear you at all. I'm going to turn it over to, I'm going to go back to Pastor Jordan. And I've seen you, pour into so many people into this community. I've seen you pour into your own kids and make sure that their voice is heard, and they're doing a great job at that, all three of them. Your grandkids, I see their voices being heard. What advice do you have? And I ask, Coach Jennings this as well, and Dr. Swafford, what advice do you have for future generations to come? And also, what sparked you to be a part of this movement? You said because of COVID, you're home, but you're still making things happen. What sparked you?
Well, I guess if you speak in terms of spark, I think like everybody on this call, they've talked about who came before them, teachers that made an impact on them. I was blessed to have a father in this community who has always been active. But not only was he active in his season during the 50s with Dr. Varner's father and many others, but I grew up watching him. I've been a part of the movement since I was 12 years old. I was with Dr. Julian Bond and others who came to this city to sign up people in the mid-60s, I'm trying to date myself now, in the late 60s and early 70s. I've walked with the Dr. Raph Abernathy's during that season, came up through the civil rights. And so just watching, and that's the other thing about mentorship. I think sometimes when people think they're looking for a mentor, they're looking for someone to sit down with them and give them a list of do's and don'ts. I don't think that's what a mentor is. I like mentoring like Jesus mentored. He took 12 men and he didn't sit them in a classroom and drew on a chalkboard, but he said, come walk with me. And I think that that's what leadership is. And so you asked earlier, how can you get in touch with Pastor Jordan or any of these other callers? Okay. Well, one of the things that I have come to grips with, I've buried 105 young men. So I've been mentoring young men and people all of my life. I've got probably about 13 ministers that are with me now. When I was in Indiana, I think I had about 25 just walking with me. And my father and I, we dealt with women ministers before it was even popular. So we kind of have been out of the box from that standpoint. But this is one of the things I say to individuals who I've had people to walk up and say, will you be my mentor? The answer is always yes. I've had guys who ask me, will I be their father? And I tell them, I would gladly be your father, but here's the deal. There are only 3 people that have no choice, okay? Jermichael, TJ, and Dewan have no choice. I'm gonna be their daddy whether they like it or not. Anybody else that wants me to father them, you gotta choose me. I can't choose you. But there is nothing I have that you can't get. But I think that that's the key. I think when you ask for a mentor, sometimes I think people come to the table thinking what a mentor is and should be, or what a father is and should be. And if you don't immediately match what they think it is, then they say they didn't get what you have. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes you just have to walk with the person. And as you talked about, how do you stand as a leader? You got to know who you are. You got to know who you are. And that is one of the things my parents instilled in me. I've heard statements from others. My father told me at a very young age, Trinae, you're no better than anybody else. You are no better. Get this, you are no better than anybody else. And then he looked me in the eye and said, but you're as good as anybody else. I never forgot that. And you can't make me think I'm not who I am. Okay. And some people call that arrogant. I'm not arrogant. I just know who I am. Right. And so I think that that's the key. You want to know how to get a mentor? Call them. Okay. Ask them.
Pastor Jordan, you gave me the best advice, and I quote you everywhere. I don't care if I'm on a stage or if I'm on the radio. I said, he said, Donna, you know, I was going through a really, really dark season in my life. And as you keep on living, you're going to always go through some kind of season. And he said, Donna, you know how you get through a dark season? You just keep on living. And I was like, at the time, I was like, is that it? He said, just keep on living. Just keep on getting up. So I just thank you for that, because at the time I felt like, how can I move forward? And as I sit here and listen to you all, one thing that I really haven't asked, I spoke to someone else I invited for this call yesterday, and she said, I'm more behind the scenes. No, let them make it happen. But she made a comment and said, I thought we fought for this already. I am so surprised that my grandsons have to endure what I fought for years ago. I thought we fought for this already. When I say that to you guys, what do you have to say about it? Anybody jump in? Edna, you want to jump in?
I'll unmute and jump in. I was watching one of the previous segments, and Montreal Besley said, why are we here again? I thought we had addressed this. And one of the things I wanted to talk about, he said, it's because systemic racism has become the norm. And it takes something like a George Floyd to shake us up and say what's happening to us every day is not normal. I don't know if you can see this picture. I'm gonna try to hold it up to my camera. It's separate but equal. And again, I lived through that. And when I saw that, I thought, really? Why can't you see that's not equal? You're calling it separate but equal, but it's so obviously not. Ray Charles can see that's not equal. But then I'm still in schools, even though I'm retired, but I'm still in schools. And when people say they cannot see the inequities, all I can say is, really?
Donna?
You can't see that? It has become so normal that we have to disrupt it. And when I hear people say the name of George Floyd, say Breonna's name, I think we also have to say it, the racism. And I know one of the questions Dr. Holmes always asks us is, I hear your passion, what are you doing?
Right.
So what I've committed to do is say it, call it out. We just got a draft of our newsletter that's going out at work. And the question was, do you have any feedback? And my comment was, there are a lot of people, a lot of white people.
That's right.
In those photos.
That's right.
When I see something else, I was asking, my team was asking for a teacher to serve as a coach so that we could have our residents in predominantly Black schools. And I was told, well, he doesn't have the scores. I'm saying his principal puts him with the kids who struggled most because he can get them engaged. He can get them achieving. So we're gonna penalize him for that. And if he transfers tomorrow to a high performing school, once he signs the paper, he's automatically high performing. So we have to call it out.
Right.
We have to say it when we see it. That's one thing we can do. We have to protest every moment in the spaces where we live and move. Call it out.
You know what? I'm going to be honest. I used to be fearful of calling things out, if I can just be honest. Before this happened, I would call things out and not knowing if they're going to throw it away or if they're going to keep it. Now they are listening.
Yeah.
And what I appreciate, Dr. Varner and I were on a call this week, and I was a little fearful of saying something. I said, how do you do diversity and inclusion? They said, well, we do programs. We go to the inner city, we do programs. I said, no.
She did.
Dee and I was angry. I said, diversity and inclusion is not just programmatic. How are you marketing to people like me? Who's on your board? What does HR look like? And once you get all of us to the room and to the party, how are you making us feel comfortable and accepted? I was afraid to say that. Now I'm comfortable with wearing my hair natural. Now I'm more comfortable with walking in the room and saying I own and I love to see that I'm a Black woman. And I've always been confident, but I'm going to take a quote from what another lady said in my conversation. She said, I'm always confident, but other people don't see me as competent. I'm confident.
Donna.
Wait a minute, I got 5 people talking. I'm gonna go to Dr. Holmes been trying to go in. I'm gonna come back to you, Mr. Logan, because he's finally out. Dr. Holmes, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry, my computer is on a blink today. It has a lot of its on. And I'm sorry you can't see the shirt that I have on. It says, get your knee off my neck.
All right now.
So anyway, I want to go back to what Mr. Harris said earlier. This is an opportunity. It's a window of opportunity, and it's not going to last always. And the reason we are back here today is because we did not have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I admire about Dr. Swafford is she's a doer. You can pick out the doers, people that get things done. They're not yakking and talking.
Yeah.
They're establishing a strategy and putting it in place so that they can accomplish something.
Right.
Then we need to do something. We have sororities, we have fraternities, we have the Unity Group, we have the NAACP, we have the women, the Black Women's
Black women.
Same for the men, and on and on. What are they doing? We have all these faith leaders. What are they doing? What are you putting in place to move this country forward, to move Chattanooga forward? Chattanooga's neighborhoods, where I work as a community advocate, are awful. It's not getting to the table, it's who do you represent when you get to the table.
Right.
And if you don't know who you are, you don't compromise your integrity if you know who you are. You don't compromise your ethnicity if you know who you are. You will speak up. You need to do something. Stop talking and start doing. That's the one thing I learned in a program that I was at Harvard. You have to start doing things.
Right.
Stop talking about it.
Thank you.
What's the plan? You take the money from the police. What are you going to do with the money?
Right.
You know, so the one thing I'd like to leave you with is know who you are, put a plan in place, and start doing something.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holmes. Mr. Logan, are you there?
I think I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are. And I have
hallelujah.
Yay! I have the question I have for you is, you are one of our few Black CEOs in Chattanooga, and you're one of the few. Is there a succession plan to make sure that there are other Black CEOs to come right after you? And why are there not enough Black CEOs like you, Mr. Logan?
Well, there is a succession plan as far as the Urban League is concerned. I can't say that for everybody else. However, we do have a program that basically targets that, and it's entitled Inclusion by Design. You know? Right. And thus far, you know, we're on our 4th class now. It's sponsored by Blue Cross Blue Shield. And both Elaine and Edna were at the table when we were designing this course. And right now we have over 40% of the people that have gone through that class that have basically been elevated in their respective companies. But let me say a couple of things, if you don't mind. You know, racism is in every nook and corner of this earth. You know, so it's no doubt about that. But one of the things that I'm finding out is that our white brothers and sisters don't know what to do.
Right.
Ron and I have been talking about some things of late, as well as some other people, and we've had a few of them to call and say, am I racist? How can you help me to maybe do things a little differently? What do I need to do? So they're looking for direction. So the question will become then, what type of direction are we giving them? All of you have said and commented that this is a movement, not a moment in time, and hopefully will continue to do so. And I'm really energized by it because within this movement, there's hope. But at the same time, in terms of working within the corporate community and other segments of the community, we have to be prepared to give some level of direction in terms of where do we need to go from here. A lot of them, or a number of them, I can't say a lot of them, a number of them are asking the questions, particularly maybe to their diversity officers, well, how do we look in reference to this question? Are we racist? Is the opportunity open, and so forth and so on? It's kind of hard to believe you don't know if the opportunity is open or not. So I kind of look over that a little bit. But what we do have to be prepared to do is to give some level of direction in terms of where do we need to go from here, from the standpoint of the companies as well as the pillars in the community. So when I look at pillars, what I'm talking about is I'm talking about healthcare, education, I'm talking about affordable housing, I'm talking about the digital divide, I'm talking about workforce development. And if you look at each one of those pillars, right, we're at the bottom of each one of those. We're in a crisis situation, even from the standpoint of education. We may be educating putting together a whole different level of people who will be homeless because of the disparities in education. And we know it can be done because we've seen Elaine and Swafford, what she's done. We've seen what Dr. Johnson is trying to do, even with the wall of dissent that he's having to deal with. So I think one of the things that we really need to caucus about, and Ronnie and I have talked about this, is that we have to bring the millennial generation to the table and begin to caucus and talk with them about, well, what are the issues? What do you see needs to be done? And what are you willing to do to facilitate that? So those are some of the things that we're grappling with right now.
Mr. Logan, can I ask you this, and you all can chime in too, but I do want to talk to Dr. Swafford and Dr. Varner. But what about the generations, my generation? Because we always say, let's go to the millennials and hear them. We're the next ones to come to pass the baton to, and then we need to pour into that millennial generation as well. Like, what are we doing to ensure that there's a platform and an opportunity for us again at the table and in the CEO seat? Like, we want help. We want to
Donna, can I respond to that?
Wait a minute. Go ahead. And then I need to go to Dr. Varner and Dr.
I'm sorry, but
okay.
But one of the things that I find that's very interesting, and let me bring some clarity to it. Particularly in our neighborhoods, in our communities, we are mislabeling people. Millennials are in their 30s. Okay, the people that we're calling millennials, too often, are Generation Z and the iGen generation. Let me do it again. Millennials are in their 30s. Okay, and that's important when you really start to talk about this whole issue of generational diversity. From a corporate standpoint, you are right on point, and Warren alluded to it. Those of us who are in certain positions have to assure that there are succession plans that have people of color. I know at Blue Cross Blue Shield, that's what our succession plans have really look like. You've got to make sure that you've considered all of the various groups. And we've talked a lot about diversity, and this might surprise some people. I don't talk about diversity very much. It's in my job title, but I don't really talk about it very much because diversity is organic. If you have two people, they can be the same race, same gender, and you still have diversity. Most of us don't. I don't have anything to do with diversity. Diversity is organic. Inclusion is intentional, but cultural competency is imperative. Right. And as people, we've got to learn, and it's been mentioned about all the ethnicities that are out there. That's a cultural competency makeup. We've got to be able to understand that. And we've got to continue to ask one question. Warren and I have been talking almost daily and nightly for the last 3 weeks anyway, because we're trying to work on something. But one of the things I said, there's a lot going on. Everybody, I agree, everyone is not racist. But if you don't speak up, you become an unconscious contributor to racism.
Right.
The last thing that a fish notices is water. And so when we start to talk about programs and processes, and I guess let a little bit preacher in me come out, because God created grass once. Okay. I hope my preacher's going with me. God created grass only once, and then he created processes by which grass could continue to grow. We've got to have a strategic plan. God gave us grass, but he expects us to be good stewards of that grass. We've got to water it. We've got to fertilize it. And that's analogous to our young people. And so to my mind, there's only one question that needs to be asked at this time, and it has to be asked. I'm asking it at Blue Cross, and we picked up the mantra. and Warren and I have talked about it corporately, organizationally, and individually. There's really only one question that needs to be answered. In this time, what are you going to do differently?
Right, right.
The real question is, what are we going to do differently?
I'm gonna move real quick because before these ladies get off phone, because I'm coming back to you. I'm coming back to you guys, and to more questions. The session is not over. Dr. Varner, Dr. Swafford, what can we do to move forward in this time where this is not just great momentum right now? What can we do as leaders? What can we do as a Chattanooga community? What can the people that are watching do at this time, to piggyback off of Mr. Harris?
I'm going to mention one thing because it's my space, education. It is no surprise to me and to lots of people that at CGLA, poor kids of color in short order are achieving at high levels, reward status repeatedly, kids whose minimum ACT score is 25. It is no surprise because we have known all along it's not the children, it's the adults.
Right.
We have a group of chronically underperforming schools. Every few years we change the name. It's the I zone. It's the opportunity zone. Just like when we were in school, even though they were called the Bluebirds, we know they were the slow readers. Thank goodness Elaine is going to be working with them. They've changed the name again, although I don't know how Brainerd got to be Midtown. But this is it. This is it. Every single day, we are killing children long before they become adults. Our public schools are killing children, and she's right. We know what to do. We keep doing it.
Right.
But we won't do it. Donna, you went to arts and sciences. I didn't know what. I was at Dalewood with Coach, and I could have stayed there forever, but that was the year that they were trying to satisfy the MAP lawsuit. And so they were transferring teachers all over town. And so I thought, well, if they're transferring everybody anyway, I'll go for arts and sciences. And once I got there, then I realized what the white rich people get. We didn't get that, and we would never know. That's one of the reasons you isolate the low performing schools. So they don't know what the other people are getting. They don't even know what to ask for. Elaine knows what to ask for. I know what to ask for because I've seen what they get. But right now, in our program, Project Inspire, we get adults who cannot write coherent paragraphs. We did that to them. Every time I see a derelict on the streets, I think we missed our chance. We are the reason. We educators are the reason that he's out here on the street begging for money because we didn't do our job. And we are doing it right now in 2020. Right. We're doing it every single day. We're still segregating schools. We have one plan for the high performing schools and a very different plan for the low performing schools, and we're wondering why it's not working. Howard used to be the Vanderbilt of the South. So it's not segregation alone. It's the privilege. And I don't think privilege is an ugly word because I enjoy privilege. But what we don't do with privilege is we don't share it. Those schools that were established in 1986, and when they were established in arts and sciences first years, it was required to have racial composition that matched the demographics of the city. And the time, let me tell you what year it started eroding. 1986, the year that the James Mapp lawsuit was settled. All of a sudden, year after year, they stopped requiring. So those schools still get all the privileges, but their admissions processes are gatekeepers to keep Black people from getting in. And on the brochure, you'll see one Black that almost looks white on the brochure to let you know it's diverse. But we're not falling for that. So one of the reasons CGLA is so successful is instead of all the new teachers, it's got extraordinary thinkers. Kids are special. Just the school doesn't have the disruptions of kids coming and going all the time. And the district could do that. They don't ask, you know, they call a community group together, and that would be like calling a community group and asking people at the BILO what surgical procedures would be the best to adopt. Why don't they call some teachers in? Why don't they call some educators in? Why don't they call some people with high expectations for children in? But, you know, they keep doing this, and it does outrage. I have to see it every single day. What is happening to the chronically underperforming schools is criminal, and we are complicit if we don't stop that. So I'll stop now.
I love you, Dr. Varner. Dr. Swafford.
That said, Lord have mercy.
Look, I ain't never seen my fifth grade teacher talk like that.
You know, I don't know if you all, some of you pastors may know Pastor Whitley Phipps. He's a renowned baritone, but he's a great man. And I had the privilege of being on a phone call with him about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And he said, people of character respond to crisis, not with criticism, but with creativity. People of character respond to crisis, not with criticism, but with creativity. And I said to my kids last night as we were graduating those young ladies you were talking about, you know, we have our first Ivy League recipient of about $81,000 a year scholarship. She was the valedictorian. And I said to them last night, as young ladies, you need to make sure that you find your place in the world and take your place in the world. And I said to them, through this COVID crisis, this particular class, I said, you were like a reef in the ocean. You were bendable, but you would not be broken. And that's what we have to keep telling our young people. Don't be broken and stay in the struggle, and it's going to be hard. But I also said to them this, you know, as you take your place in the world, make sure you understand other perspectives. One of the problems in the world right now with all this is people don't understand other perspectives. And so before we critique, criticize, form an opinion, one of the things I always do is listen and assimilate information and try to see things from different sides and different points of view, because you can't walk in somebody else's shoes. And I said to them last night, surround yourself with diversity, demand equity, and stand up and be included, but also be inclusive, because that's the only way you're going to ever really change the world. And so as I was talking to those ladies last night before they left me for the last time, I was trying to drill into them. You know, you also got to have, I heard people say, you got to have action. You got to have action. You know, I do help schools. I have had a plan. I walked into CGLA, and Edna was exactly right. There are no children issues in school buildings. There are only adult issues. And I went into CGLA. They were last in everything 8 years ago. And I said to the adults, these aren't children issues. These are ours. I said to the children, these aren't your issues. You can learn. Nobody's been teaching you.
That's right.
And so we have that plan. I have a, you know how a car has a 30-point check? I have a 15-point check. It hadn't changed in 8 years. I have 6 strategies. They don't change. I tweak them as needed. And so, you know, you got to go with the plan and stay with the plan. But let me say this. I went down and I visited the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama, where they have the lynching memorial. And I stood there that day and said to myself, really heavy-hearted, you know, I cannot believe what a travesty this was allowed to happen. And then I stand there and I'm thinking today, how can this still be allowed to happen? You're not hanging people from a tree, But when you put your knee on somebody, it's not in midair, but it's the same thing. How can this continue to be allowed to happen? And so I go back to this. You know, we talk about poverty in Chattanooga being twice the rate of white poverty. We talk about children who Martin Luther King said in '67, these third grade children lag in education. What are we saying today?
Same thing.
They're still lagging at the same rate. We know what to do. We've got to figure out as leaders how to make sure that we start changing these policies and changing things that are ethically wrong. You know, I always say, I can't change people's hearts and minds, but I can change what they see and the experiences they get, which may make them, I can't change it, their heart and their mind, but I can make them see differently and think differently. And as an African-American woman, we have to call to action. And so I said this, I'll end with this. The number 13, I count really lucky. And I count it lucky because the 13th Amendment was the Emancipation Proclamation. And I've asked my staff, my next t-shirt will read, I believe the number 13 is lucky, but what 13 things will you do to start this change? What actions will you take to start this change? And so, one of my 13, obviously, is to remain the voice of the children, but also call out the issue of racism to my friends, whether they're Black, white, whatever they are. And make sure that, first of all, make people hear and speak truth. That's one of my 13. And I'm going to leave you with that.
Thank you, Dr. Swafford. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'm going to ask either Coach, I know Mr. Harris is going to respond to this, even Mr. Jordan, Mr. Laurie. So we have a lot of talent here in Chattanooga, and I heard Mr. Harris talk about it yesterday on the Chamber's event. We have a lot of amazing talent here, but yet we go to other communities to get that talent. Or sometimes we leave the city. Some of you guys have left and you've come back. How can we retain talent here in Chattanooga? How can more people in these organizations, in Blue Cross, UNAMs, EPBs, other nonprofits, how can we retain talent here and pour into the talent that we have right here in Chattanooga?
I can address that question.
Go ahead.
The primary reason we are not keeping people has to do with jobs. We talked about education, and you're right. It starts with education. Once people graduate from here, where are they going to get a job? We had a diversity study. I haven't heard any results from that diversity study. Again, if you have no strategy for keeping people here, for getting people on boards that represent the people, for getting people jobs, for making sure our children are properly educated, making sure our parents know what to do and how to raise their kids, making sure they know how to stay out of the justice system, knowing their rights. There has to be a strategy. We have to hear the voices of the young people. We hear too many older people. We're not listening to the youth. Their voices must come to the table. So to get people to stay in Chattanooga, there must be opportunities. There must be appreciation for the talents that we have in the people that are here. And it starts with us, those of us that's sitting around today chatting about this subject. It starts with us.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. How can we retain talent? Or I'll jump to another question if you got it.
Let me just speak to it quickly. I think there are some very talented young people in our city. Our corporations in Chattanooga have a responsibility to reach out into our communities. Some of the things that I'm seeing, and I would imagine others are seeing the same types of things. I work at Blue Cross. We have over 5,000 positions, if you will, at Blue Cross. We have doctors, lawyers, behavioral health clinicians, you name it, it's there. Too often, Chattanoogans don't understand that we do more than insurance. That's our bread and butter. But it takes a lot of other positions to make all of that happen. It's interesting to me, even as parents, and I listen to parents encourage their children to go to all of these other places. Education is certainly a key. We need to look at the types of majors. Jobs are changing. We've got to do some reskilling. We've got to do some upskilling. And we've got to have programs in place that speak to our young people. I know I've talked to faculty members with UTC, Chat State, and others. A couple of years ago, for example, and I'm going to stop. A couple of years ago, I was at the Alabama A&M graduation, and certainly I was proud of those young people. And a young lady said she had just finished and she had a marketing degree. And I said, what's the job that goes with that? You've done the work. What's the job? Mm-hmm. And she said, I don't know. And so marketing, you can have a marketing degree, but marketing means different things to different organizations.
Right.
And so we've got to start to connect in a better way with the educational system. There's got to be a marriage between the educational system as well as the organizations, the corporations. Again, I'm going to toot our horn a little bit. We have a mentor program with Elaine's school, and those young ladies come on campus and they're dynamic, and we bring in front of them, we put in front of them the people of color, the women of color, so that they can see people who look like them. We have externship programs. We have minority mentorship programs. We have a lot of those types of things, but we've got to start to tell people that Chattanooga does have something to offer. I have a lady that drives daily from Atlanta to work at Blue Cross, daily. And so we've got to let young people know, we've got to look at the skill sets. We've got to have better corporate and educational marriages, if you will. We want the Donna Elle's to remain in Chattanooga. We want the graduates of Howard High School and Brainerd and Tyner and see in all the other schools to remain in Chattanooga. And it's going to take a Herculean effort on the part of corporations and education to make that happen. And I think
Can I say something about the education and keeping kids in Chattanooga?
Yes.
First of all, if we don't get them in the right majors, right? I raised my nephew. I told him what he was going to major in so he could get a job. And so if we continue to let them major in, you know, so I tell my kids, and I'm just, adults have to be honest with kids. This psychology major is not going to get you a job unless you go get your master's in psychology, right?
Yes,
absolutely.
We've got to guide them. That's why I love being in a STEM school with girls. If they can't see it, they can't be it. The other way we keep them is expose them to what's out there. I make my kids go out and say, you know, you didn't know this existed? You can do this. We have girls who said, I never dreamed of being an engineer before I went out and saw this happen. Right. They can't see it, they can't be it. And that job thing, getting them job, starts way before they apply for a job.
Yes.
Can you tell me what major you told your nephew to go into, Dr. Swafford?
My nephew wanted to be a music major. And I said, no, we're going to do something where you can go into, I said, you can still be on stage. I said, but you're going to go into the event planning and the corporate communications end of things. Right. You might sing your way in backwards.
A lot of people don't know that my major started out as communication.
You know, and he loves to talk. He loves to plan.
I changed it to business management.
So, you know, it's business. I said, oh, no, you can't go in you can go into music on the side.
Right. Right.
And the communications major is one that we don't have enough people of color. Again, I speak to Blue Cross. We just hired a lady less than a year ago. She's in Warren's program of inclusion by design. She's an outstanding Black female, but we hired her from Nashville.
Wow.
Because Donna Elle didn't apply for the job?
Because Donna Elle didn't know about the job. But because I have a great mentor now, I always know about opportunities that are out there.
Can y'all see that card right there?
Barely.
Barely. Yes.
Well, he's in graduate school, but since they've been on COVID, he created his own business this summer. It says Stores to Doors.
Right.
And so, you know, that's part of his communication and what he's gone through. So, I mean, you know, you just have to guide. Young people need our guidance.
Yes.
And particularly my demographics, I have to become a parent at school. Somebody has to step up in the schools and parent the children into what they need to look at and what they need to do. And so I help guide my children, as I call them. All of them are my children there. And it's called in schools in loco parentis. I'm your parent while you're here.
That's right. I'm gonna ask everybody a quick question because I want to be a good steward of your time, because I know we can go on for hours, and it looks like with this group, I'm gonna have to probably have a second conversation because I think I haven't received everything. But Mr. Laurie, I'm gonna ask you, then I'm gonna go to Mr. Logan. What does legacy mean to you? And what should we be doing in the future? Mr. Laurie, what does legacy, what's the definition of legacy to you?
Legacy to me is setting the positive example for others to want to follow and to duplicate. My son wanted to go into law enforcement, and I told him that law enforcement has changed, and I was not going to speak up to politically or anything to get him a job with the sheriff's office, that he wanted to follow in my footsteps. And I told him I wasn't going to do it, partially because I knew that if I got him hired with the sheriff's office, then, and something happened to him, I was going to blame myself if he were to killed in the line of duty. So I told him, if you want to do this, you're doing this on your own. So he went through the entire process of application, interviews, and everything else. And one of the people who was a chief of the jail at that time on the board, who interviewed him, came and told me, he said, your son blew my mind. I said, what do you mean? He said, I asked the question, what are your goals? And he told me, he said, your son told us his goal was to achieve the same rank that his daddy has achieved or higher, because he was going to make it through. And to me, that's legacy. I didn't know that I had that impact on him in any way, shape, form, or fashion, but for him to, he's a sergeant now in the corrections and on his way to lieutenant. And I mean, he's going to achieve. So setting the example, a positive example where someone wants to emulate you or achieve what you have accomplished, that's legacy.
Thank you. Mr. Logan, what is legacy to you, and how can we move forward?
Well, legacy to me means establishing a blueprint of how to have impact, you know, as such for the next group or generation that's coming after me. I know, like in our situation, you first have to basically build it at home from the standpoint of your children as such, and making sure that they're on the path that you want them to go on a path that they can likely be successful, but also in the businesses that we're in, whether it's in education, whether it's in a nonprofit or the for-profit community, is basically establishing that blueprint so the next person that will come behind me will take it even another level to the extent that they can maximize the impact, and they will always have something to point to from the standpoint of this is what we got done and this is how to get it done, and let them basically bring their individual gifts and talents to the extent that they can take it a step further. So that's what legacy is to me.
Thank you, Mr. Logan. Pastor Jordan, I'm gonna switch up the question for you. What do generations after you need to know? And what do your white counterparts need to know about being unapologetically Black?
Well, if you're going to ask what our generations behind me need to know, I used the word vacuum early on. But first of all, we need to know, if you're going to know where you're going, you need to know where you've been, okay? You've got to realize that wherever you are standing on the shoulders of someone else. So get you some good footing. Find out where you've been, where you are now, and then you can determine where you need to go. What do my white counterparts need to know? I tried to get in earlier when we were talking about you can't fix something if you don't name it.
Right.
You gotta call it out. And I mentioned we all have different responsibilities. I've listened with great interest with Dr. Varner and Dr. Swalfer and Dr. Holmes. They have done an excellent job in articulating what needs to happen in the education system. I am a former teacher, but education has not been where I spent my life. I spent my life in trying to mentor. I've spent my life in trying to preach the gospel, but I've also, in this season of my life, challenging people who say they are preaching the gospel to really preach the true gospel. And that it is not just about salvation. There are some people who say it's about salvation, others who are saying it's not about justice. First of all, you cannot truly preach the gospel and miss justice, because that's what the gospel is all about. And so for my counterparts is challenging them in the area that we are in. We had a major prayer service on our parking lot the other week. There were about 1,500, 2,000 people there. I got criticized for not bringing them downtown to protest. Well, that's not who I was trying to influence. I called all of those pastors in of major churches before we went out to pray. And I said, we've had prayer meetings before. This is not a regular prayer meeting. This is about racism and injustice. And so when we hit the stage, we need you to say the word, because I cannot have you standing in front of your congregations and all of these business people that you pastor with these clear lily white messages. We're talking about racism and injustice. Say the word. So at this time, that's what I believe my call is. My call is for these religious leaders who pastor the educators that Edna was talking about, who pastor those business people that run and Mr. Logan worked with, they sit in your congregations, say the word, okay, and challenge them with the gospel of Jesus Christ. So no, I'm not protesting. I match all of the African American, I meet the age requirement, and I do have underlying conditions, all right? But what I am doing is fighting the doggone system to make sure we got COVID tests for you when you're out there without your mask on, that you got a place to be tested so that you won't bring this back to your families. So we all have different roles, but my role right now is to challenge the church, not just the Black church, but the white church, to name it, call it what it is. It's
Amen.
Racism and injustice,
Amen.
and let's address it.
Thank you. Coach Jennings.
Yes.
Some of these leaders have been sending me some questions, so that's why I'm looking at my phone, making sure I get all their questions answered. But I do want to ask you, Coach Jennings, through the years, do you have any regrets about your leadership or as you're coming through the years in different positions? And what are some of the things that you, or one of the things that you have learned from the most that you can share with some of us?
Well, no, I have no regrets. There are some things that you would probably do a little bit different if you had the knowledge and wisdom and expertise. But I have no regrets. I think my career and the things the Lord has called me to do and the space that He has placed me in to represent Him, I think I've been obedient and consistent there. The space that I'm in now in city government, one of the things that we're focusing on, particularly working through Government Alliance for Race and Equity, one of the City of Chattanooga initiatives, is to look at policy, to look at the things that may be a barrier for the African American or minorities in government. So that's what we're trying to on through the GARE process, is look at policies, look at procedures, look at things that stands in the way, or code type of words that hold African Americans and Blacks back and interfere with them advancing in various positions or in leadership. So the other thing that I would say is in government, we got to get the people with the right character and that will stand and be willing to dismantle systemic racism, institutional racism, those people that will be bold and courageous enough to take it on and call it like they see it. Founding fathers got it wrong, and we have to acknowledge that, particularly in our white community. They got it wrong. They used slavery for economic gain and benefits, and that's what it was all about, and reduced a Black man to be 1/3 of a human, not even be considered equal to what God created him to be. So we got to scrub policies, we got to scrub everything that this country say they was founded on, and look at it from a realistic perspective and make changes and move it forward.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you. Dr. Holmes.
Yes.
So I've had a lot of the leaders send me this question repetitively, and you actually sent the same question to me as well. You work hard in this community. Everybody knows your name. You are, as they say, boots on the ground. And I know you guys have heard that. I want to ask you, what are you doing to prepare the next generation? Because I've asked you guys this question, but I just want to ask you specifically. There's another leader in your community that would love to do the same thing that you're doing. What are you doing to make sure that they have everything they need for that process and preparation?
I include the youth in almost everything I do. They have a seat at the table. They should also have a voice at the table. Mm-hmm. I view a problem as an opportunity because I consider myself a doer. I will go to meetings, I will listen. If I have something to say, I will. I have not only a background in education, but my background is also in the health field. And I've had a lot of experience with the criminal justice system. I feel it starts with education, and several of you all mentioned that. Involve the youth, hear their voices. They have a lot to say about their own problems, about how to solve problems that we have no clue about what they're going through. We hear teachers talking about kids coming to school and they've fallen asleep. I said, have you followed them home? Do you know their household situation? Probably this is the only place they can go to sleep. So I just feel that we need to hear more voices from the young people. We need to hear the voices of our parents. The elders, They're supposed to be the wing, the wind beneath the wings. I am an elder. I'm 86. And I feel that there's a lot to be done, but you can't do it all. So you need to involve the young adults as well as the youth. I value the youth. Every time someone asks, can you help me get some people together? Believe you me, I will have a youth involved, because that's our future. They are our future, and they only learn by doing and making decisions, coming to the table. We value that decision, and we don't correct them and say, well, it used to be this way. No, we need to hear what they are saying. We need to help them with their process and understanding. So that's what I would leave you with today.
Thank you. Dr. Holmes, I interviewed the young men between the ages of 18 and 28, and they said they want to hear from leaders, but every time they hear from the leaders, they always chastise them in the process.
That's right, they do.
And they said that they want to hear, but they said they feel like they're always wrong, so they won't continue to come. Mm-hmm. And that was actually part of my son saying that, and I was like, whoa, okay. So that was a good lesson for me. Mr. Harris.
Yeah.
Here's my question for you, and this is coming from another CEO and leader in our community. He wants to know, what issues do you think is most critical to drive economic power for Blacks in Chattanooga over the next 5 years? What issue do you think that's the most critical to drive economic power for Blacks in Chattanooga over the next 5 years?
Wow. What issue do I think is most powerful? I think we have to understand and have a business acumen, certainly because we need to know, we need to network better, we need to be involved with the Chamber of Commerce, we need to talk about the educational piece of it, and we need to do some upskilling and some reskilling. Corporations such as a Blue Cross, for example, can develop mentor programs for people who own businesses. And we do that to teach them how to become certified, to even be our customers from a vendorship standpoint. I think we lack a lot of knowledge around relationship building with corporations. I think we need to become more astute at that. I think it's our responsibility, those of us who are at the table, to become outreach practitioners, to educate our community on what it takes to work with large corporations. When I think about myself, and I'm going to piggyback, I'm living in the red. By every statistical category, I'm a failure, growing up in the project, a broken home, welfare, the whole bit. But I have a plaque hanging on my wall that says, "You're not qualified," because I've heard that all my life. But that plaque for me is like saying sick him to a dog. So that's what works for me. But I think people in organizations need to start to talk about building wealth. We need to start talking about how you have to develop a business plan. We need to start to understand how to reach out to corporations for assistance in building your company. And I don't think we do a very good job of that. And I mean, corporate America, Chattanooga corporations don't do a very good job of that. So we've got to build some relationships with our minority communities, particularly our African-American community. If we're really going to say we're unapologetically Black, we've got to do the things that send the elevator back down. And you've mentioned about 6 or 7 things today that I'm going to take back to my corporation so that we can become better corporate citizens. And I would love to talk more with whoever raised that question because there are some opportunities.
All right. I'm going to close it out. I don't know if Dr. Swafford is going to answer this, but I know Dr. Varner, you wanted to close out, but I have a good question for you both if you want to answer it. What is the one thing you had growing up you think, wait a minute, that's not it. If you had a magic wand to fix the future for the next generation, what would you address first? If you had a magic wand to fix for the next generation, what would you address first? And you can close from there. Dr. Varner?
Oh, okay. All right. I thought Elaine was going first. You know, I grew up poor, but I never felt poor. I had parents who believed in education, religion. They did all of the things that I contribute to who I am today. Volunteered, everything. Every kid doesn't get to choose his parents. And that's why I think education can be a real equalizer. And you do the best you can and hope that once you launch kids, you'll get a Donna Elle. I was between schools one day and I stopped into a Crystal just to get a little work done. And across from me was a young man, blue suit on his computer. And he said, "Hey, Miss Varner." He said, "Thank you so much for teaching me how to write." And I just responded, "It feels good, doesn't it?" And he said, "Yes, it does." And so while I don't have any biological children, that's my contribution, to make sure every kid has a great chance for a future. I want to make sure they are articulate and curious, and that they can write well, and that they have confidence when they're at the table and talking to people. And one person can't do it. I just recently saw the film series, Little Fires Everywhere. And if you haven't seen it, it's about dysfunction. And the symbol of dysfunction is this little middle-class house in a little middle-class neighborhood. And the kids realize that the adults are dysfunctional. And so the symbol, the house, they set the house on fire. And when the firemen came, usually the first thing they do is determine the origin of the fire. And they said, "We can't tell because there were little fires everywhere." And I think that's what we have to be. We have to be little fires everywhere. Dismantling systemic racism, doing what we can do to raise expectations for children. And so that's what I want to be. I'm not Martin Luther King. I didn't go out and protest either, but I can protest from the space I occupy. And so my part is going to be that little fire in my place that ignites and disrupts and makes sure that every kid has a chance, not just the affluent, not just the ones that are lucky enough to be born to good families, but every kid has a chance at a great future.
Donna, before Dr. Swafford wraps up, can I say 3 things?
1, let's go. Now you got 3.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I am 86, retired. I look in the mirror every day. And you know what? I feel proud of myself because I've never compromised my integrity and I've never compromised my ethnicity. I'm proud to be a Black woman.
Yes, ma'am.
And everybody that I have met over these 86 years either know it or they feel it.
Wow.
I'm through.
Donna, if I can interject, Pastor Jordan said something as he was growing up, and I'm sending this out to the young people that'll be listening to this broadcast. Mm-hmm. Pastor used the word arrogance, and for young Blacks, we must recognize that is going to be a derogatory term that is often used towards us if we are effective, because we represent a threat to that person. So they're going to use something to cut us down. I had a deputy chief that referred to me as being arrogant because I believed in me, mm-hmm. and I stood up for me.
Yes.
And he said I was arrogant. And I asked him, I said, define arrogance. And his response was, well, I really can't explain what I mean. I said, then you, and this was a chief, I'm a patrolman talking to a chief. And I told him, I said, you have no business using a word that you don't understand the meaning of. To me, arrogance is thinking that you're better than. And I told him, I said, I am not better than anybody. If you ever see me looking down on a man, it's because I'm bending over to help pick him up. So don't you ever refer to me as arrogance again.
Excellent.
Or arrogant again.
Right.
And, you know, law enforcement is a profession. It's not a job. And for some people, back when the economy was not that good, they were looking for a job. Then they said, okay, if I become a cop, then I have a steady paycheck coming in, et cetera, et cetera. But they came into it as a job. I have a badge, I have a gun, I'm God. When I say jump, you're supposed to ask how high. That's not what law enforcement is. Law enforcement is a profession, and a profession that people go into to make the world a better place. Yes. I hope you do a show later on about what we've gone through in the last killings of Black men by cops, because I'm embarrassed, but I'm disheartened by these individuals because they're not professionals. They came to a job, and that irritates me to no end. But if young people are listening, just understand that many terms are going to be used to mess up your mind thought. You have to know who you are. It's just like what was said a little while ago. You've got to believe in yourself. And if you don't believe in yourself, then nobody's going to believe in you.
That's right.
So you've got to go forward, and don't let people tell you what you cannot achieve, because you can achieve anything that you make up your mind to. I achieved the rank of a deputy chief. I was told in the beginning, we're going to get you fired. No, it didn't happen. So believe in yourself. Thank you.
I'm going to end it with Dr. Swafford, because I can talk to y'all all day, and I know I'm going to be able, as I clean house, I'm going to have this on, I'm going to listen to it, because you guys have given me so many things that I can take away. And I hope that someone listens today and says, you know, because of them, and I've already thought it, because of you guys, I am here. And I thank you for that. Dr. Swafford.
I think your original question was, if we had a wand, what would we do with it, right?
Yeah, but I got to say something to you before you answer that question real quick. You're getting ready to, after how many years in Rotary? 100 and the first Black in how many years?
I'm the 107th president.
She is the first Black president. Congratulations. After 107 years.
That's my president.
This is something in Rotary, you're in Rotary, you're voluntold. You don't ask to do it. And I didn't want to do it, but I will say, I said yesterday, it's quite apropos and timely that an African-American is stepping up to the plate. And it's really important that I take all this that's happening and take it to the platform with me. I'm not stepping in that position for stature. I already know who I am, what I do, but I will be lacking if I don't do something with this platform in regards of diversity and equity and inclusion. And if I had a wand, we've been talking about DEI forever. In one of my goals is to create a diversity and equity inclusion group. I mentioned this the other day in a meeting in New York. They bring the real issues to the tables. They change policy. And if I had a wand, we'll start to do that here in Chattanooga. But I'll tell you, I go back to, if I had a wand, it's time to quit figuratively busing children past education. You know, I grew up where my siblings were bused from Sale Creek past Soddy Daisy, past Hickson to Booker T. Washington. That's where they graduated from. My first 2 years of school, I went to a segregated school. So figuratively, we're still busing children past education, because if I had a wand, I'm opening a Montessori elementary school. And you know why? Because I believe that's the way that we're going to teach the children that we have chosen to educate at CGLA and Montessori.
Right.
They need to be like my grandbaby who sits here at 4.5 and can read this paper like I can.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to stop and start having children when they enter that 3rd grade. If I have a wand, we're going to change that. We've got to change that, because if we don't, we're going to look up 20 years from now and somebody's going to be asking these same questions. It's ridiculous. It's inexcusable. And so this moment in history needs to be defined with dealing with, yes, blatant racism, but it also needs to be defined in dealing with unspoken racism and heal the country through educating and moving our children where they can use their voices so that they can predict and guide their own future.
Right.
That, if I had a wand, that's what would happen.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Hey, Donna, in closing, let me just say this.
This is the last closing.
I'm not going to, I don't have a speech or anything. I just want to congratulate Elaine, because she's been a phenomenal leader. But also Valerie Armstrong has taken over the Chamber of Commerce.
Yes, that is my girl. I'm
phenomenal Black women in this community. In addition to others that have been on this particular panel, they've done phenomenal work. And so our hats are off to them. And I'm not only saying that, but being behind them to encourage them in any way we can.
And that includes you too, Mr. Logan. We appreciate seeing you and staying at the center of everything for years. And thank you so much. I have my call to action. And I'm gonna be very transparent in this moment. When I went from radio to the corporate nonprofit world, and you heard me say a little bit, I felt alone. And I realized something that my son brought to the table. He said, Mama, we're spread out so thin. And even though we have several civic organizations, and even though we have the Divine Nine and all these things going on, you very seldom see these major players that I'm looking at right now on this Zoom call together. There's power in numbers. And I say we start out virtually, but I would love to see something similar to what Dr. Swafford said. I would like the young leaders that I've spoken to actually start that charge. And I need to bring us together, because I need to be able to have conversations and network with my Black leaders first before I continue going out.
I just started answering email.
Somebody's phone is pulling up. I don't know who that is, but I just want to say that is my call to action. I want to bring us together, and I ask that you continue to do what you're doing, but I want to see power in numbers where we're collectively together, because we are working so divided right now, and we're not accomplishing what we need to accomplish together in Chattanooga. So I charge that with you guys. If you are already not my mentor, you are officially my mentor now, and I just want to say thank you. Thank you for allowing us and paving the way and allowing us to follow. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Y'all are amazing.
Have a great one.
You too.